I'm going to be talking about API fails in IoT this time. The reason being is you'll know we spend a lot of time looking at embedded systems, looking at hardware security and the like, but actually the most critical flaws we keep finding are those in the APIs that connect the mobile apps to your smart product. Now, over the last year, I've been collecting more stuff. Latest acquisition is in fact a smart suitcase. This is a rather cool device. It powers itself and follows you, and we've already found security vulnerabilities in it. So if you see an unattended suitcase rolling around an airport, you know I'm probably around. Anyway, let's share some slides and see what we can do. I've got a relatively short talk this time. Let's see if that is going to work. There you go. Is that all working? Excellent. Life is good. So, know who we are. There's over 100 of us now, group of really high-end security researchers with lots of skills in embedded systems, but also other fun things too. You probably know us as some of our published research, but I'd like to look at some examples of some of the API problems we've seen over recent years. The place I'm going to start isn't actually IoT related, but you know what? You get free beer, so I really like this one. This is a piece of work that my colleague Alan did about 3 months ago, and he discovered being a shareholder in Brewdog comes with some challenges. Brewdog haven't had the best press coverage of late, and whilst poking around at the shareholder API, the shareholder app, he discovered that the requests were authorized using a bearer token. Nothing wrong with that to the API. However, it was static and hard-coded into the client-side mobile app, which means that everyone had the same bearer token. As a result, you could make requests of any user account, and Brewdog do something quite cool for their shareholders. You get discount codes, so you save a bit of money on your beer, but they give you a free beer at the bar on your birthday. Now, given the issues with authorization to the API, you could actually recover any user's birth date and then generate a QR code and show it at the bar and get yourself a free beer. We worked out you could get about 3,500 free beers per day. Obviously, we reported this. Brewdog didn't do a great job of dealing with it. Sadly, they don't really seem very well up on vulnerability disclosure. We had to get the press involved, but they did finally fix it, which is a result. Now, who's put on some weight in lockdown? Because I sure have. And I'm sure many of us have got home exercise equipment. This is a piece of work my colleague Jan did at the beginning of the year. And Peloton, amazing bit of kit. The Peloton bicycle to keep you fit, the Peloton treadmill, which had some unrelated issues. But Jan discovered that some of their API requests weren't being properly authorized. And this is a very, very common problem. There's a bit of a theme to this talk around API leaks. And what we discovered is, whilst users want some of their data to be published in classes, so your performance stats, so you can go up and down the leaderboard, maybe your user ID. But what you didn't want leaked was things like your fine, precise GPS location and address, gender, age, stats, and stuff you'd set to private that wasn't being withheld. So actually, stuff that you'd set to be private was being published in the class too. The privacy controls weren't effective. The API wasn't authorizing those requests properly. Peloton didn't do a great job of responding to this one, sadly. They did improve over time. They did have a vulnerability disclosure program, but didn't really respond to us through it. They acknowledged it and it just went dead. Nothing happened. Fortunately, again, once the press were involved, they'd actually just recruited a new CISO in between disclosure starting and the vulnerability being fixed. New CISO was really cool, took it on the chin, got it fixed, thanked us publicly. And I thought, do you know what? That's cool. Vulnerabilities happen. It's how you respond to them that matters. And actually, I think Peloton covered themselves with glory at the end of that process. So anyway, going back a little bit, other crazy API issues. You might remember a few years ago, we looked at a smart hot tub. Now, yeah, why do you need a smart hot tub? Well, the idea being is that you can heat it up when you need it to, rather than having it heating all the time. So you save a load of power. So when you're leaving your office and traveling home, press a button on the app and it heats up. Unfortunately, my colleague Alan and Dave Lodge discovered that the API credentials were hard-coded in the mobile app, which of course you can reverse engineer trivially. Get the credentials out, you could then start to reverse engineer the device IDs, and we discovered there wasn't really correct authorization going on at all. It was simply authorizing requests based upon the device ID, which were largely based upon the MAC address of the device. That's not good, right? Because of course you can recover Wi-Fi MAC addresses from places like Wiggle. So that's the Wireless Integrated Geographic Location Engine. So you can log onto that and recover MAC addresses from Wi-Fi access points by querying SSID types. And very quickly, we had a list of all the spas, the hot tubs, and their MAC addresses, and you could take remote control of them using the API. Great, good on. You could also do fun things like change the temperature, turn the jets on, and you could shower the users with stuff. Does it matter? Does it matter that I could heat your hot tub up when you didn't want to? Not really. What did matter is that actually for speed and of access to market, they'd outsourced the provision of the platform that the API connected to. And that same platform provided services to lots and lots of other IoT brands and products. We found truck telematics on there. We found car telemetry. We found medical technology, all on the same API platform, all with similar challenges to the way they're authorized devices. What a fail. Not good, hey? Next crazy place. You might remember we did some work on kids' watches, tracker watches, and we discovered all sorts of problems in that you could access other parents' accounts that they're using to track their children with. And my colleague Vangelis discovered a bunch of insecure direct object references that allowed trivial compromise of other accounts. Unfortunately, it didn't just affect one brand that we first looked at, MySafes, which my colleague Alan found. It also affected nearly 3 million different tracking devices. On top of that, we looked at another brand called TikTok Track, which was an Australian brand, which Troy Hunt, you probably remember from Have I Been Pwned password auditing fame. He helped us get hold of one of these. He lives in Surfers Paradise near Brisbane. And we put one of those watches onto his child and discovered not only could we recover GPS position, like all the other watches, in the case of this one, we could rewrite GPS position. So we could make it look like his daughter was going for a swim in the sea. She wasn't. She was at her tennis club. But like a massive problem with API authorization that meant we could do more than just recover data. We could modify and tamper with data too. We also spent some time looking at cars. And one of the areas that really interested us was a claim of unhackability. By the way, if you ever want independent researchers to pay attention to your products, call them unhackable. Great way of getting a lot of attention. We looked at a Russian brand called Pandora that claimed it was unhackable. Looking at the mobile app, we discovered it had lots of functionality. So locking and unlocking the car. You could trigger or silence the car alarm, an alarm that you've put on your car to make it more robust and secure. Lots of other crazy things. Vangelis discovered an API authorization flaw in the password reset feature. He discovered that it wasn't authorizing the request. When you triggered a password reset, it didn't verify that the email account you were sending the reset to was the one associated with the account. So you could change it and send the password reset request anywhere and take control of the account. Fantastic. On top of that, he also discovered if you change that email address to a Pandora user, you'd then take admin privilege on the platform. Crazy, right? So this is my point. We keep coming back to problems. We get very concerned about hardware. And yes, it's very, very important to assure the hardware security, but often it's the API flaws that lead to complete platform compromise. Once you've done that, you could then query the API by the type of brand of car you wanted. So let's go for the expensive Range Rovers. You can then get the current GPS coordinates in real time, drive up behind the car, trigger the immobilizer, pop the doors, and pull the driver out and grab the keys and drive off. So the irony of a product to make your car more secure and robust actually made it easier to steal. Love that. Vangelis also looked at another product, which is Viper, known as Clifford in the UK, Viper across some territories in Europe and the USA. Very similar product. Guess what? An API flaw that allowed us to compromise accounts. Vangelis did it again. He compromised one of the largest, most popular brands in the world of third-party car alarms. We also looked at Tracker. You might be familiar with Tracker. If your car's stolen, you or the cops can track the car and you get it back. And in the USA, where it's known as LoJack, they claim a 95% vehicle recovery rate. How cool is that? Except there was a problem in the API. There was an insecure direct object reference that Vangelis found. And unsurprisingly, could delete theft alerts, could even take control of accounts, and even delete the geofences that the tracking device have checked into. So again, a product that's supposed to make your car safer and harder to steal actually makes it easier. Nuts. Very quickly fixed, by the way. You might have seen last summer, we started looking into the security of electric vehicles and EV chargers. This is some work we've been doing for the last 2.5, 3 years on and off. Been a big project. I'm a huge EV fan, as you probably know. You might remember we bought a Tesla Model S a while back to reverse engineer. That was fun. But I've been looking at the security of electric vehicle chargers of late, and this is quite interesting stuff. So one of the very first to market was a product from a company called EO. I believe they were first to market in the UK. This is one of their chargers. Quite a nice form factor. I quite liked it. It came with a control box, which I think I've got in my smart box of gear over here. That's the box. And inside there is a Raspberry Pi. Oops. Now, back to hardware security. What do we know about that? Well, you might want to prototype, learn, develop, and teach on a Raspberry Pi. You don't use it for production systems. It doesn't have a secured bootloader, which makes it very difficult to protect secrets like credentials and the like. It's also quite expensive in volume, so probably not the right product to be going to market with. There are much cheaper and frankly more secure ways of doing it. But I do love the Pi. I have one at home. I use it daily for various things. Anyway, my colleague Andrew was looking at this device, reverse engineered it, pulled out the firmware from it, which is a matter of removing the SD card, and found lots of interesting vulnerabilities in it. Now, actually, yeah, we're really cool. We sent them the data. They took action. They fixed it. Over a period of time, they replatformed, then moved away from the Pi. And the latest product, which I think is called the EO Mini Pro 2, much more robust. So good on. But we then started looking at others, and I've got in here, this is fun. This is a charger. It is relatively popular. It's called Project TV. It's actually, I believe it's a rebrand of a product made by IoTSF in the Far East, and it sits and uses a platform from an organization called Shenzhen GrowWatt, based out in China, in Shenzhen. Unfortunately, this had a complete fail of API authorization. Again, just like the hot tub, it authorized using device ID, which is on a sticker on the side, which you could also recover using Wiggle, for example. So this is pretty nasty. What we discovered, my colleague Vangelis discovered that you could actually compromise any device in real time, turn it on, turn it off, which could cause spikes on the power grid if you did it synchronously. But also you could push unsigned firmware to it remotely with no further authorization, which means you could create a stepping stone into the home user's network. And that's pretty much as bad as it gets, right? Well, we then had a look at another brand. This is an organization called Wallbox. It's a Spanish firm, I believe, that's growing very rapidly. And actually, it's a really nice form factor charger. We've got one on the wall outside the office, but it's not connected to our network. They had, as my colleague Vangelis discovered, a couple of idols on their API, which allow complete platform compromise. You could compromise any charger in real time. Turn it off, turn it on. And then we were quite surprised to find that inside it was a Raspberry Pi compute module, which again has very similar problems, lack of a secure bootloader, which means you can compromise shared secrets, so the pre-shared key from the customer's Wi-Fi, just by popping the top off, pulling out the Pi. The bit that surprised us with this one is Wallbox were very good about fixing the idols, but they refused to re-platform away from the Pi, which really surprised me. Again, commercially, it's not a great decision because the Pi is quite expensive in volume. Surely use a module that's built for the purpose. But anyway, we'll move on. We also looked at charger networks. So in the same way as you can roam with a mobile phone across multiple networks, there are also quasi-roaming agreements with car charger networks, so that I can have one brand of mobile app and use someone else's brand of charger when I'm out and about. Quite cool. I have an EV myself. I use this quite a bit. We looked at one called ChargePoint, very large charging network across the US and across Europe. And we discovered an API issue, a GraphQL endpoint, which had introspection, which effectively leaked all their data. In fairness, ChargePoint were amazing at this. We dropped them an email, they got straight back to us and they fixed it overnight. But it looked to us like it was leaking all customer data. My colleague Vangelis found that, and we were really pleased to get it got fixed fast. The last couple of places I want to go is looking at not just the user authorizing and authenticating to the API. I also want to think about the device. And this is a challenge I'm sure you're very familiar with. But an example I've got is some work that my colleague Andrew did a little while back. This is a Swan CCTV camera, battery powered, nice form factor. It lasts about 30 days without charging. Stick it up, it's got a microphone and speaker. Now, I started looking at this and looked at the API and how the requests were going from the device to the platform, rather than the user to the platform. We discovered that in this case, Swan were using a third party called OzVision to provide the platform. Andrew started intercepting and tampering with the data, had a couple of cameras trying to see what would happen, and switched the ID from one of our cameras to the other camera. And what happened? We could see the other camera's feed. There was no further authorization to the platform by the device. Now, we needed to prove this further, so we spoke to some other researchers. A friend of ours called Scott Helm, amazing guy, and he said, yeah, I've got one of those cameras. Here's my serial, see what happens. And guess what? We connected to it, switched his serial to ours and vice versa, and discovered he has better Lego than us. All we had to do was switch the serials, which weren't long, unique, or complex enough, and we had access to someone else's stream. This is a common problem with CCTV. So let's just go back. What was going on there? So in terms of authorizing the device to the platform, the device announces its identifier, and then the platform goes, hello. But of course, the problem there is the hacker comes along with the same identifier, and the platform goes, hello, that's fine. And that's exactly what happened there. We just switched out the serial. We had access to their stream. Now, one of the problems that we all know about is certainly early on in evolution of IoT, a device identity was a bit of a challenge. And often, and we still do see this on cheaper IoT devices, we see the MAC address as a source of identity. Why? Because the Wi-Fi module, the Bluetooth module, has a MAC address, so it's cheap and free. One of the problems, of course, yes, MAC, 2 to the power of 48 combinations, great, nice and random and long, great, except, of course, half is the OSI. Which means that's half your randomness gone already. And very commonly, you'll find that MAC addresses are actually allocated to the devices fairly sequentially. So you just hit them and off you go. That means you can do stuff like enumerate. So you can make a request to the platform. The platform goes, hey, yeah, I'm here. I'm a device. But of course, if there isn't a device on that ID, the platform errors out and goes, don't know you. So you successfully enumerated all the devices on the platform. You've got all the serials. You can access all the video feeds. Not good, right? How should we do it? Well, you all know this. You put a cryptographically strong private key onto the device, which allows trivial authentication to the platform, nice, safely, and securely. Doesn't also work so well. Anyway, to wrap up, the biggest issues we find with IoT that lead to massive compromise of customer devices and data tend to be API related. I know we get very focused on hardware, but actually it's the API which are the most common, fastest, and easiest ways, in our opinion, to take large numbers of user accounts. What we tend to find is most requests on the API are correctly authorized. It's usually only 1 or 2 requests that have been overlooked, typically around password resets and password management. Often we'll see an error is made, perhaps in a new code push, maybe where there was some testing going on and the authorization wasn't then reapplied. So what I'd strongly recommend you do, anyone involved in IoT providing an API, is please, please, please check that every single request is authorized, and then get a third party to check those requests are authorized too. Because if one of them isn't, hopefully someone like us finds it and reports it to you quickly and privately. But worst case is a rogue third party finds it, and now you've got all of your customer devices exposed, and that's not a good way to be. Anyway, those are my details. I hope you found it useful. All of the examples I've given in this talk are on our website, on our blog. Please do follow. Find us on Twitter and LinkedIn. And do remember, of course, we are pen testers. That's where we make our bread and butter every day, is working on pen testing devices and making things better. Thanks very much.